Death's recipe uncovered. Darkest night begins on the evening of November 14th, 2016. Professor Ethan Graves sat motionless in his backyard, watching the storm rage above him. The sky was swirling gulf of darkness. Thunder cracked like distant gunfire, and hailstones hammered against rooftops like any army marching toward destruction. Yet none of it was shocking to him. Not the sirens wailing through the city, not the desperate screams echoing in the streets, and not the fact that Ravenshire was falling apart. He had seen it coming. He had warned them all, but no one listened. Now the city was paying the price, and Ethan was the only man who knew it. Why? A deadly prediction. Just 24 hours earlier, Ethan had stood before a crowded conference room filled with city officials, meteorologists, and emergency responders. He had held up a thick stack of research papers, his voice trembling with urgency. A storm is coming, not just any storm. This one is different. If we don't act now, the city will suffer a catastrophe we can't control. The mayor, a man named Daniel Fitmore, chuckled dismissively. Professor Graves, we have had storms before. Ravenshire is built to withstand them. Ethan's jaw tightened. This isn't about the storm alone, it's what the storm will trigger. The air pressure shift will destabilize the chemical reserves at the Lomax industrial plant. If those chemicals mix in the right conditions, a lethal gas will spread across the city. Silence fell over the room, then someone laughed. You expected us to believe a storm will kill the city? Ethan slammed his hand against the table. Not the storm, the chain reaction it will create. A perfect alignment of natural and chemical disasters. If we don't shut the plant down, it'll be the biggest mass death event Ravenshire has ever seen. Mayor Whitmore sighed. We appreciate your concern, but we have experts monitoring the situation. Ethan clenched his fists. Then may God help you all. The meeting ended, no one took action, and now Ravenshire was dying. The first victims. By 4 p.m., the storm had strengthened, the winds howled, tearing through streets, bending street lights like twigs. By 6 p.m., the lightning came. At 6:42 p.m., a single bolt of lightning struck Lomax industrial plant. The impact shattered one of its cooling towers, rupturing a chemical containment unit. A deadly gas, methyl leucinate, began to leak. At 7 p.m., the first deaths were reported. The victims never saw it coming. They breathed the air, unaware it had turned into a silent killer. By the time they felt the burning in their lungs, their bodies were already failing. Hospitals were overrun within the hour, but there was nothing they could do. People collapsed in their homes, clutching their throats, desperately gasping for oxygen that no longer existed. Ethan stood at his window, watching in horrified silence. He had been right. And now his city was suffocating. Desperate escape attempts. As news spread, panic erupted. The roads became a battlefield of screeching tires, desperate screams, and overturned vehicles. Entire families fled on foot, hoping to escape the invisible killer, but the gas moved faster than they could run. By midnight, the dead lined the streets. Emergency responders wore masks, but even they began to collapse. The gas was too potent. No one was safe. Ethan clutched his research papers, his mind racing. There had to be a way to stop this. Government cover-up. The next morning, the storm had passed, but the city was in ruins. The death toll thousands. The media called it a natural disaster, but Ethan knew better. 2 days later, government officials arrived in Ravenshire. They blocked off entire districts, confiscated documents, and issued statements that downplayed the real cause. Ethan tried to speak out. He called journalists, scientists, activists. No one published his story. His research destroyed. His credibility ruined. The official story, a storm-triggered industrial accident. The truth, a preventable massacre. One man left. By the end of the week, Ravenshire was a ghost town. Those who survived moved away, their lungs permanently scarred. Ethan sat in his backyard, staring at the empty skyline. He had once believed in silence, in reason, in the power of knowledge. But knowledge had failed him because no one wanted the truth. And so the only man who knew the death recipe of the city remained silent. For now, truth never dies. Years later, a young journalist, intrigued by whispers of covered-up catastrophe, tracked down Ethan Graves. "Tell me what really happened," she pleaded. Ethan looked at her, a fire rekindling in his tired eyes, and for the first time since that terrible night he spoke the truth. And this time the world would listen. Final words. This is not just a story about a disaster. It is a warning, a cautionary tale of how ignorance, arrogance, and greed can lead to devastation. How many more cities must suffer before we learn?